And we are, hi, Jeff. And we are starting at 4:44 Pacific time and 7:44 Eastern time. It's great to start on an angel number. We were going to start a little earlier, but this is when we started, and that's the way it is. And if you've been watching my show for a long time, you may know that I may schedule something at one time, and then it starts 20 minutes later, and that's pretty common. You know, it really makes me think that, I didn't used to live on Indian time, but I certainly seem to be living on Indian time on YouTube. If I can use that word, I guess because we have the indigenous, but that was like, if you heard of about the term of Indian time being it starts when it starts, and so like my father had. And went to a funeral down the tribe several years ago, but that was before I was living in Seattle or I was living someplace else. It was when I was living on my own and living in this world, and I wasn't, here. And first off, the people that got up to talk about the guy, well, anyway, it started like 40 minutes late, and it says, well, this is 2:00 roughly. It's 2:00 Indian time. I mean, this is when it is, it starts. We're all here. And that's when it starts. When we're all here. At 2:00, they weren't all here, but now we're all here. And then the funeral goes on. And then the people, instead of having positive things to say about the guy who just passed on, it's like, oh no. There was nothing positive about the guy, nothing at all. And then we're going to segue into what we're talking about today, which is the Dark Enlightenment. And I was thinking before I really looked into this that I was going to find something positive to say about it, but I don't see a damn bit of anything positive about it at all. And Jeff here has been studying the Dark Enlightenment for quite some time.
Okay.
And so he's going to take it from here.
So what I want everyone to know first is that Bill was kind enough tonight to actually lay out something that is going to fit really well into the trajectory of the things that we've been talking about over the last few weeks. It's not really a deviation because in some ways it does proceed from consciousness insofar as what it represents and what a microcosm of it represents with the reading that I did earlier this morning ahead of this show about, transhumanism. But the Dark Enlightenment and Curtis Yarvin. Curtis Yarvin was a Brown University graduate. He's also very much steeped in the Silicon Valley area of California. And his ethos or his claim to fame, some call it sycophantic in the sense that people like Peter Thiel, who of course now backs J.D. Vance, syllogism-wise, people think that some of the things that if J.D. Vance were to get in the office, that Peter Thiel bankrolled, J.D. Vance's Senate run in Ohio. And he also had some part in getting Donald Trump into office. So some of these policies that people find draconian actually come from some of the Dark Enlightenment principles that Curtis Yarvin is a proponent of. Some of which, though, are a little more outside of what this administration is doing, a little more reminiscent of Aleister Crowley and what Aleister Crowley put forth years and years and years ago with regard to, I want to say, stewardsmanship of how, and for those who don't know who Aleister Crowley is, a lot of people I would think in this arena do, but leave that alone for a minute. Curtis Yarvin's idea is that we need to kind of go back to the Middle Ages in some sense, that corporate fiefdoms and neo-feudalism are what would drive our world, because the consciousness that is democracy has outstayed its welcome. It's worn out its welcome. It no longer serves. It no longer works, is what he will try to tell you. However, contrary to that thought, creativity and all these things that would abound can't survive in some sort of neo-feudal order. But when a hard stop comes as a result of a small few who own and I'm not even talking communism or socialism and all these terms that get bastardized for meaning something that they don't when people use them. We've reached a hard stop in the sense that we can't move any further in these people's minds without a more hierarchical a feudal order, because the means of everything at the top are going to be, from a scholar's point of view, like Curtis Yarvin he would fashion himself a philosopher, in the sense that democracy doesn't work for the very reasons that over time certain things have fallen that no longer serve a purpose. And his biggest thing right now is that for there to be order in a world of technology, and for there to be order in the growth, there needs to be, sadly, subordination to authority. It's as if each feudal king is running their own fiefdom. There's nothing enlightening about it. It's dark. There's sort of a paradox to that, a dark enlightenment. And yet, by the same token, too, the very people that have brought us to where we are on the other side, or on the Republican side, are going to find eventually that what is going to supplant that agenda now will be something probably down the line more like this if J.D. Vance were to get into office. That is not to say it will work, but there is, as Bill and I were talking about, nothing promising or encouraging this whole thing. What it can do, what it promises, is almost akin to like what Elon Musk would say about how we have the social safety net. We won't need it because soon, robots will inhabit the jobs that we have, and all of us will have a universal income, which by its very virtue is a democratic socialist ideal. So it's snake oil. It's a mirage. It's
that's where, but that's where this whole thing could collapse, because if we look at, let's say, what I was in thinking, and I had like visions of this when I think it was when I was younger, in my 20s. It was when I was actually younger, but I was it was the first time I experienced Eucharist in a mystical sense, and I had a transpersonal experience.
When you were given the bread, is that like when you're given the wine and the bread?
I wasn't even. I was just there in this.
Were you a minister?
I was just. No, okay. I was just visiting a Catholic church, and I wasn't taking. I think I was in RCI. I don't know. I don't remember exactly where, but during the Eucharistic prayers, I just felt a hand just pull me right out of my body, and I resisted it with everything. But I eventually gave in, and then there I was. I was in my body. But at the same time, I was looking over everything. But then it was like there was this. I'm starting to like dissolve into a greater consciousness, and then whammo bammo, I'm back there, and then they're breaking the bread and they're handing it out, and so I kind of use that as like a sign. Oh, that's what this ritual looks like. that's what it looks like on the backside. And so that's what it represents, and it represents this sort of a mingling of everybody together, and then you come together in this sort of a one consciousness kind of a thing for a moment. But then as I go on and you start thinking about these things, and you're thinking, oh, the church is, all it is doing is all it is doing at this particular time, it's just transmitting information from one generation to the next, and it's not accessing any of this, any of these teachings. And so if they were to actually think about it, they could unwind all of this stuff. So I got most of my New Age philosophy or whatnot came directly out of paying attention in the Catholic liturgy. But nevertheless, what I was saying about this is that, as in Ephesians, I think it's Ephesians 4, Paul talks about body of Christ, and then in that the body of Christ, people, all the members of the body of Christ, they come together into unity of the body of the consciousness of Christ. He doesn't use that language, but he kind of does. We could use that. And so this, I was like, oh my God, that's what the second coming is. So the second coming is that all this Christ consciousness, this unity consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, it all comes into human society. And so this is how humanity progresses or evolves into the next form, whatever that form is. And, presumably we still have bodies, and that would be a point in time where, we have a fusion of spiritual technologies and physical technologies, and all these kinds of things start to fuse together. But so we wouldn't be able to see, as it was happening, you wouldn't be able to see that this is, you could say in a Christian sense, that this is Jesus's return, because everyone is expecting it to be a singular individual coming back, but not a mass consciousness coming back, because if you look, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, and it's talked about in this sense of that, wherever two or three are gathered, there the Christ shall be. And so what I see in this is that there are these forces that exist in our world that can see that this is happening, and they're trying to shut it down. And this dark enlightenment thing is one of these ideas out there to try to force to shut down a human evolution into its spiritual consciousness, and to have that. And then that there are a lot of other different forces that are trying to do that.
Singularity, the concept of that plays into this as well. I find that it's almost as if it's a very watered down the way because there's a lot of contradictions in it that actually reinforce everything you said as something that is inevitably going to happen. All those positive things that you wouldn't expect to happen are indefeatable, or they're going to happen whether or not you try to obstruct them. And I kind of feel like if there's anything here with this whole cathedral idea that Curtis Yarvin has, that that this whole theocratic thing, where this country is going in that direction, points to, by its very contradiction, the opposite of something negative happening. And I kind of feel like by trying to reinforce all these horrible ideas that the Dark Enlightenment presumes are on the forefront of the vanguard, or it's only going to make things on the other side better, because you can't create humanity itself could implode. But But I don't think it would be realistic to expect spiritually that people would be subordinated to something that they couldn't wrap their heads around or grasp. And
Yeah.
conceptually, there are a lot of things wrong here as far as the way this is presented. Beyond the fact that it's utterly dystopian, I think the bigger problem with it is it doesn't appeal to even evangelicals or people that might be waiting for ascension, because all it does is subordinate your will to something less than what you're hoping for in a rapture.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, and I was thinking, actually, when I also, just before, I popped on, I was thinking of another thing, that because the Dark Enlightenment being wanting to have a more hierarchical society, and the other thing that seems to be these forces, these backlash forces, is to not let everybody commingle together, so that everybody looks, because they did a picture. Is like, what would a human being look like if all of the colors merged into one, and everybody, and so so in the movie Cloud Atlas, they had that look of that person. And I was thinking that, oh, Cloud Atlas, because that future world, where one of the future worlds that they were in was probably one of these worlds that was totally dystopian, and where, that's where they were farming or cloning people for food, and kind of that whole Soylent Green thing. I think I like Soylent Green better, but that's also because I'm a bigger fan of Charlton Heston, and because Charlton Heston has that John Wayne type of spirit to him, and which, I did like John Wayne movies, but I like Charlton Heston movies better. Ben-Hur, and but that Soylent Green was an excellent piece of work. But that in that sense, where the world is overpopulated and it's hot, and it's just massive amounts of poor people, and then how do you feed everybody? Well, they just liquefy the dead and then turn them into these little green crackers, and that's what you're eating.
I think, yeah, that's what they want. And the problem is, I don't think you can, without some sort of revolt, expect that that's going to work. But even more practically speaking, for the purposes of the people that control the wealth, and not only would they be destroying us, but they would ultimately be destroying themselves. And I just don't. I think that's totally antithetical to what Curtis Yarvin's vision is, in a sense, because I don't think, like Peter Thiel, he wants humanity to go away. I think Curtis Yarvin might be more mainstream in his belief, in the sense that, Peter Thiel would like to be, overlord, but I don't think the way Curtis Yarvin presents it, Curtis Yarvin presents it as more of a noble cause. In some ways, even though it's very, very dark. And if you misbehave, you could have your arm chopped off, or you could be, if you're no longer useful, you could be biofuel. All these things that seem very sick, but I don't even think the more contemporary view of Christianity could wrap itself, or people that are considered Christians, when they want a Christian sort of state, could give in, or this could happen. I mean, I find the transhumanist component of it unlikely, which I guess might lead to that sort of thing.
A Christian a Christian a Christian revival of the Holy Roman Empire, and having where you have a Christian government fused together. This present version of it is not on board with the eugenics. It's
And that's what
not,
this is.
and it's not on board with the whole transhumanism thing of changing God's creation by fusing it with technology, or even a microchip or anything. We're fine having ourselves being tracked by our devices, and maybe even we're fine with having a microchip in a bank card or in your card photo ID, but not having that microchip in you.
Mm-hmm.
And we probably, maybe that even having that in you is, who knows what kind of inflammatory response your body would put up with it. And who knows how, if you had a microchip in you, because we still don't even know how, what the long-term effects of tattoos are, of putting that ink underneath your skin, and your skin being the largest organ of your body. We don't really know what, if there are long-term effects of that, but maybe, but I can't imagine any religious path where purity is part of one of the virtues or principles in it, of wanting to make the body impure like that.
It's almost heretical. It's almost heretical. There's something to be said for sacrifice, but it's not even sacrifice for virtue or for religious, religiosity and ritual. It seems like it's not even a bastardization. It is an attempt to take something to humanity's edge, but I don't think that the very essence of humanity can get behind this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just was watching a news story last night. I don't know if it was on the news. I don't think it was on the news hour. It was the one right before that one. And my mom, she has to have her, Channel 6 and Channel 8 news, and every night. And there was a story about a company out of New Jersey that is working on creating essentially designer babies. So when you being able to do genetic tests on the embryos that you would create in order to okay, well, this one has autism. Well, we don't want that one. Oh, this one, it's this and that. And so it's total Gattaca. It's like Gattaca, or it's the Brave New World. So it's like the Brave New World thing and Gattaca thing. And that movie, that's starting to, on the forefront now. Will it take off on a larger? Well, I mean, outside of being insanely expensive, it's like, it's not something that the general population would ever be able to afford to do. It's just like there's like a drug out there that is showing promise, where it can lengthen the telomeres on your genetics, on your genes, and effectively, I think it was on Secular Talk, Kyle was talking about that. They gave it to a dog, and then the dog had like terminal cancer, and then next thing you know, it's running around like it was not like 7 years old again, instead of like 14. And so, something like that. And so this technologies are out there, but it's not, that's not for you and me. And even if unless you won a Powerball jackpot, what is the likelihood of that? I mean, I've been playing the Oregon or Washington State lottery since 2000, 3 drawings a week, and I've been doing that for, what is that, 25 years now. And the most I've ever won is $39.50. No, I won $150. That's right. I played a phone number. I played a random number and that I found, and I won $150. That's the most I've ever won on a state lottery. But nevertheless, it's not. But it's not enough to afford a drug that would, lengthen your telomeres. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that is, it seems to me that there's this idea of creature comfort too now, where we are so wedded to the idea that we have a 9-to-5 job and it's a subsistence level. I think that the Dark Enlightenment is one step too far beyond that. I think it presumes that humanity, in terms of its tolerance, would just be dogs. And I don't think that even before consciousness can be defined, it presumes a level of unconsciousness and disorder. And its very contradiction of trying to subordinate the will of mankind to a fiefdom. It's not like medieval order. It's almost like it's just some sort of sci-fi like representation of something that doesn't.
More like the Matrix.
It seems like
more like that. More like that. And it's where
it's like, people that have played Dungeons and Dragons, where there's this sort of hierarchy, like you said, and you can control every aspect of every. It just doesn't seem. It doesn't seem historically possible. But yet, there was something you said at the beginning of this that resonated with me, which is that the natural order of things, or the way that it would be like a wall you would come up against. And when you were saying something about the resistance when you're being pulled out of your body during that whole experience you had, there's something that is at odds with this whole thing that doesn't seem like it would work, Bill. I find it hard to believe that something like that could take off in my lifetime, much less anyone else's lifetime, because I think time moves very not linearly, because you did make another valid point about this too, which was that it's like you can put a different shade of time or be in a different time space, but it really doesn't negate the fact that we don't move like this or like this. We move sort of like, there's just something really strange about it that doesn't seem like it would work at all.
And also there was like some prophet who was speaking on Next Level Soul, who said that we're on the wrong side of the galaxy to go into a super dark ages like that. Anyway, we have to go travel to the other side of the galaxy in order for this astrologically to work out, to where we would be going back into a dark zone. Oh man, that just you never saw Lex, or maybe you never. I have a Lex was a product of Nova Scotia, and it was one of the most warped, twisted sci-fi shows I'd ever seen in my life. And but they had like a dark zone and a light zone, and and so often so in the dark zone it was like all kinds of evil things were happening, and so you it wasn't like a normal thing where you have good guys and bad guys. No, you were looking into kind of good guy, bad guy kinds of people. They weren't really good. They were neither good nor evil, but they were both. and they were acting both, and so there was, uh, and then the whole last season of it, the last 2 seasons of it were based. I think it was one of them was based on Earth, and where some guy got elected by a magic, and he was like just like a figure who was like a figurehead for this evil spirit, and but there was like that was like the second to the last season. Then there was a fire and ice. Then there was a whole season where they were on the there was these 2 planets. One was heaven and one was hell, and and anyways, that was kind of funny. That was fun, and of course it was one of them that was like, this is just okay. This is me rabbit holing it here, where a guy's driving a car and he backs up into this mortuary or funeral home, and then sign, and then it's like that part of the sign breaks off and it says fun house, instead of fun funeral house, or funeral home is fun home. I don't know. It was just a joke to me. It seemed like it was just funnier and shit. So it was a product of Nova Scotia in the 90s. I think you can watch the whole thing is on YouTube for free, but because you think of where Ange came from, or where she was like close to Nova Scotia, and so it might be that people in Nova Scotia are kind of weird, but it's cold up there. But that was an excellent piece of sci-fi. Anyways, that's my little rabbit hole. But what we can say that is, and I've mentioned this once before, is that there is a version of neo-feudalism that is existing right now, and we are in it. We are in it, and that is the form of that we're our feudal lords, that we're not paying rent to these serfs or whatever, but our data is being used to, and then we have all these different kingdoms. There's the kingdom of X, the kingdom of Meta, the kingdom of Google, the kingdom of this kingdom and that kingdom, and then all of that data is being used to and farmed out and used, and then in a sense that in that state there is a whole lot of mind control and everything else that happens because of how a lot of those algorithms work, and how they how they can control people, or I mean, it's like I'm just going to look for a couple seconds, and next thing you know, an hour has gone by.
Yeah, and you're not even aware of it. You're not even aware of the time continuum, because it feels like a few minutes. And this way that they're controlling now, there's a movie out called 2073, which kind of paints the natural evolution of this time and where Palantir would go and all that stuff. But I don't know. I think that even third world societies, Bill, couldn't respond to the Dark Enlightenment, because I don't even think there's a third world anymore to go back to. I think with globalism, unless globalism can somehow be really radically changed to where we are just the one, and we're all isolationists, and it just seems impractical with the way the internet, it's another contradiction in it. The way that you put it makes it sound possible, and it's already here. It's that neo-feudalism is here. Yes. But I don't think the full Dark Enlightenment, by virtue of global order or whatever the global order does become, could exist under that. Like this whole New World Order principle is at odds with the Dark Enlightenment, because even if there were one person that ran everything and it were Unitarian government, I think that the fighting among oligarchs or feudal kingdoms would inherently go against the very thing that they want to do, and eventually they end up fighting one another. And then what would they have left? It would all be gone. So I just don't think that it's possible, it's feasible, and I don't know that one kingdom can exist, next to another one and be equal. There's sort of this egalitarian quality to it among them, and I don't see them as being like that.
And then there's the fact. Well, there's one of the things that I think that democracy was something we got right out of the animal kingdom. Because if you watch herding animals, I watch animals all the time. I watch them all the time because and I live out in the boonies, and then being home and not working out of the home, I watch these animals, whether they be domestic cows, but I especially like to watch the wild turkeys, because they're bigger. The quail, they have the similar types of behaviors, but they don't stick around very long.
I've seen turkeys too, even in the city when I lived in Worcester, in Massachusetts. They're huge. I'm like, what?
Yeah, they are. And the first time I saw them,
away from you. Yeah.
Because the first time I saw him, I said, "Oh, is that a dinosaur out there?" I'm thinking it was like one of those long necked dinosaur things, and that's what it looked like to me. And then, it's a turkey, and it's a big bird. But you watch how they behave, and then they're going this way, and then one of them splits off and moves off, and then another one does, and another one does, and pretty soon there's a critical mass there, and then the whole thing moves. And they see it within birds, in flying birds, and in the flocks, and that's how, like the geese in the sky, and when they're going off on a different direction, they move in a body, and so it's a mob rules type of a thing. It's a basic democracy, and so and most of the that a lot of the American Constitution, a lot of it was based upon what came out of Rome and what came out of Greek, but there was a lot of it that was based on the Iroquois Indians and the Iroquois nation that was already there, because they had some kinds of a meeting of chieftains, a rule, and so forth. And I suspect that we will probably have a different form of government, and it'd be interesting to speculate on where we think that would go. But I know that what we have now, it will not always be this way, and that it will morph into something else that will probably be more stable, and that will also be able to guarantee the rights of everybody, and to have a certain amount of freedom and liberty, and economic freedom and liberty, because human beings, for the most part, they kind of thrive in a system where they can be free to be themselves to a certain degree.
I think when you can't take away freedom entirely, because you can't make someone devoid of thought unless you take it to the extreme of what Peter Thiel wants to do in its worst form. But even as you said earlier, that can have its advantages. But you made a good point about herding animals, and almost pacts and how we crave similarity and equality and being around one another. Those of us who are like and who like the same things, there's something egalitarian about that, even if it's to the exclusion of another group. But that other enclave will have its own thing. So it seems totally antithetical to thought to think that the Dark Enlightenment is the next phase. It just doesn't seem like in this time frame to me, it could, not that it would work, but it would be something that would just be doable in any country in the world, unless there is some new global war. But even with that, I think the point is we're too close to one another. One person in Australia, conversing with someone else, you have to, or how the other half live. It just doesn't seem like it's possible to me that could
not
work.
on a large scale, but it would be like, okay, if a big rock came down from the sky, which could happen anytime because we don't have the ability to stop a rock coming down from the sky. Even if we could see it coming, we haven't because we are too busy spending money on things that don't matter as civilizations, because I've always thought that we should be dumping that our NASA budget should be like larger than what we spend on the military. It should be $1 trillion a year budget right now. That's what we should be spending on for space exploration and things like that, because and it should be combined with other countries, because that would be something that could foster world peace to a certain degree. Because I've talked before that I don't think that human beings that even if we are more enlightened, I think that we will still have that desire to not knock somebody out.
It creates a consciousness that can't sustain itself, not only just for us but for them. I mean, and I also think too, it's too much in the duality. There's a duality that will always exist on this plane, but I don't think you can force another duality between the ultra feudal, overlords and peasants.
Yeah.
At least in other medieval times, there was the in between. You had the serfs, you had the peasants, you had the, the nobility, you had whatever.
The merchant class, and
it just seems that the Dark Enlightenment is almost like the thing that would come after the Renaissance if it didn't work.
I see.
That's how I kind of see it, because there's this period of ultra awareness of art, and then you had, before that in medieval times you had the plague, and then after the plague you had capitalism for a while. I think the birth of capitalism went on and on and on, and it would seem to me that in a plague scenario where the resources are dwindling, and that's kind of like where we are now, everything's poison or everything is not affordable, it would make it more readily susceptible to that type of Dark Enlightenment. But instead, in the timeline, in the continuum, you had things like capitalism, but before that you had the Age of Beauty and the Renaissance, you had the Reformation. It just doesn't seem to me like the way things go cyclically it would work.
Because they talk about, capitalism and needing to have capitalism go to the next step, but how do you have capitalism when there's no competition? How do you have capitalism when there's like 4 people that own everything? You can't. There is no competition, and because what the next step is that all that stuff gets broken up again, which is what happened 80 years ago to a certain degree. And that's where they talk about that 80-year cycle that we're at the end of an 80-year cycle, and we're going to go one way or the other. but most likely we'll probably just go to another progressive era. But we don't know. It might be something. It might be something different than what we're expecting.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that dread is something that propels people to something like the Dark Enlightenment. It could be the fear, getting back to this, just as the Black Plague killed off a lot of people, the fear that resources are becoming scarce now. There's all this global warming. There's all these other things happening, and maybe they see the writing on the wall. Maybe the people that even have all the wealth and power, just like with the Black Plague, they couldn't save themselves. You can't save themselves from a natural order of something. And I think that this is why we're seeing things like bunkers being built. If that in the White House, that ballroom beneath it already has a bunker that I believe he's expanding. When hearing about it.
Well, yeah, there's been a bunker around it. Yeah,
but there's always been a bunker there. So it seems to me like a lot of this reactionary stuff that is inculcating fear is a projection, and the Dark Enlightenment is a projection of itself, because it's devoid of supposedly light, but inherent in those contradictions that we talked about so far. You can't have a dark enlightenment. I mean, can you?
Yeah, it's contradictory, because that's what everything is a contradictory term. It's really just darkness. It is wanting the Dark Lord of Mordor to rule over the whole earth, and yeah, that's what it seemed. And the sun blacked out, and nobody, just everybody miserable and working.
That's 50 hours right too. Like we're having to come to terms with what we are and what we've been doing. And I think that in the microcosm of a short period of time, we're starting to see not so much the error of other people's ways, but it's almost this personal awakening of like the fact that collectively we don't feel like we can overcome it. So we turn that projection internally, and this Dark Enlightenment projection is the ultimate thing about power mongering, or feeling like you can control a situation that you can't. Yeah.
Is it also like a sense of like a God complex? Because when you because if you look at how many, let's say the pharaohs, they thought of themselves as gods. You had Caesars in Rome, they thought of themselves as gods, and that if you put enough power into the concentrated, and so this is like one of the sins of humanity, because we have a lot of these sins that we have that are all because you give anybody too much money too fast, and then it ends up ruining their lives. And it takes a very, very strong individual to be able to handle a sudden infusion of money into their life. And so it's like, I mean, if you've ever, I play the lottery, but I've also studied a lot about, you have these scenarios you go through. It's like, well, what happens if you do win the lottery? And so the first step is, well, you tell no one. The second step is, before you even pick up the check, you hire a lawyer. And then maybe you tell your mom, maybe, but best off is you don't ever tell anybody about it. And then you have, and then depending on how much you win, now maybe the next step in there is you pay off all your debts. That's, whatever your debts are, you just make sure you're debt free. And then you put yourself on. Then when it comes to your job, you don't quit your job. Whatever you do, you don't quit your job. And then the next thing is, you don't touch the money for at least a year, because it'll take you at least 6 months to get over the shock of winning. And so when you see
Yeah.
these stories about people who win the lottery and then the next thing you know they're busted, it's because they spent it all in the first 6 months. It just evaporated. And then the people who were a lottery win becomes a gift. It's because they didn't change their life. And you kind of see that in like actors and people like that, and you know, sports stars and so forth, because they go from being dirt poor to being wealthy in just almost overnight. And so, like, for instance, I always had thought, because you know, when you follow some of the lives of the actors, and you see, like, let's say Harrison Ford, he came into kind of his wealth when he was around 30 years of age, but he had been, you know, he'd done a little bit of acting all along, and then he was about 30 years old when he was Han Solo, but he was in another movie before that, but he was still building houses when he was, you know, after doing that, and so he had that work ethic, and he was a working class man. But I don't know that I had heard any stories of him going on drunken rampages and being thrown into jail, or going in and out of rehab, and there are no such stories like that. And I think that's the same with Tom Hanks as well. But a lot of those people, when they get that large dose of money that they'd never had before, these problems arise.
Mm-hmm.
And I know two lottery winners from this area that I'm here, and one of them I went to high school with. And he just lives in a single wide trailer. I think he has like less than 10 years left of his 25-year annuity. But his life wasn't without problems. There were problems with that, even though it was like just a few $1 million, and it wasn't like $30 million, you know.
But there were issues. Yeah.
There were issues. And then another guy, he spent his entire lottery winnings at a casino.
God, that's so
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. But, you know, yeah. Anyways, we talk about that stuff. But so being what the point is in this is that these are the sins of humanity, and there are these things we can't handle, and power is one of those things we can't handle. And people go nuts when they get a little bit of power, and unless they were born into it. I guess that would be something to be said about having a royal class or royalty. But even then, within royalty, I mean, you go back to the stories, and then, you know, and then how many of them are just nuts, and how many of them were, you know, and how inbred they were, you know, first cousin marriages, you know. First cousin marriages are legal in every country in Europe, and it's like half the states in the United States first cousin, and then but in half of those you have to prove that reproduction is not possible. But there are states where first cousin marriages are legal, you know. but you know, first cousin marriages goes back to you know, keeping the money in the family.
There's something tribal about it. There's you know, and the idea that by extension, you know, to something that far removed, you know, ex-cousin, 5 10 whatever, you are maintaining a certain social order that you want to preserve, and that's by choice. And there's something still very egalitarian about it, as perverse to people as it might sound. And it is your choice. I mean, I guess, you know, that's one of the things that you can make and sometimes it is it's a fiscal move, to where, sometimes now we're thrown into situations where it's the other way around. We have to be with someone not by choice, but because we need to maintain that fiscal stability. Whereas the other way, maybe you would join forces to make something better. And the ideal byproduct might be you do fall in love with them. But anything that is as isolationist as the Dark Enlightenment doesn't presuppose anything good. It's to me, it supposes anything bad. And unfortunately, it seems to me that you would have to fall very, very far, very, very fast for the conditions for that to work. Even if the transhumanist agenda were to be successful, and you could distill consciousness, and we were talking about this earlier too, where you don't know, because it's a hard stop in that arena to where you begin and where someone else ends, because it could be you ending, but you never know your beginning or your end. And even if you live forever through consciousness and you can replace the parts, and your expendable parts can be biofuel, who's to say that when your consciousness is distilled, someone can't still manipulate it, and someone still can't do the things to it that wouldn't make you you? So who's to say you would live forever, which is the only positive thing I maybe see in that sort of transhumanist agenda. But that's another problem, because how do you know you live forever? How do you make, you don't have the choice, but you also don't know if you do.
Yeah, it's, even like in Asimov's last question, it was only the AI that survived the death of that universe. But the AI had fused itself into higher dimensional space. And so it survived the death and then the rebirth of a new universe. Because the last line of the story was "Let there be light," and then boom, a whole new universe was born. And so that would be, in me thinking of, oh yeah, maybe, the prophets, these are the prophets of our generation, is these thinkers. But even then you have you have the positive thinkers, but you also have the negative thinkers too. And so you are you giving too much time on your hand, because like some people might say with me, that I've had too much time on my hands to think up these things, like, by making these correlations between Catholic theology, or just for what I observed sitting in Mass, and just these rituals and what those things meant in a mystical sense, the mystic point of view of this, that there was a different story that was being told here, and all you had to do was think about it for a while. But for most people, we don't progress as a people, because we don't have enough time to think about it. So there was like a one of the thinkers that I kind of tune into occasionally, Aaron Abeki. I think he's like some form of a derivative of Judaism, a mystic Jew, but I think he's trying to resurrect in our generation the Essenes. I don't know that you can, because that's in the past, and they're gone, and we don't know that we even have any writings from them, and then that even if you were like to channel somebody from them, could you really resurrect something from the past? I mean, maybe, but I don't know that you can. I mean, it would be like, it's Jurassic Park. you aren't really creating dinosaurs because the dinosaurs are gone. You're just using what was left of a genetic code, and you're putting it into something else. And so it looks like a dinosaur, but it's not really a dinosaur because it's something new. And so I don't know that you could resurrect the Essenes, and what writings exist from that time period. And I don't think any writings do exist. I think that what you can do is you go back through the scriptures and you look, maybe John the Baptist, but there's John the Baptist may have been in a Essene. Maybe some of the mystic writings may have come directly out of the Essenes, but you don't really know. Or those Gnostic Gospels, because there's not very many of them survive, because like the first, I think the oldest, most intact gospel that exists is the Gospel of Thomas, and they found that manuscript from like 150 or 160, and they found fragments of other ones, just like one line here or there that comes back from like 60 or 40 or 60 or something like that, but nothing. There's really nothing from that time period, and then there's like from the history. So that's where people would go down the track where they might think that Christianity was completely fabricated, because there's no historical record from the Roman side of an existence of, or even like the execution of all that it doesn't exist. And so maybe it was I think that it might just be a fabrication, but it may not be. It may be that there was this guy named Jesus who was like a Buddha, and when he died, but the movement didn't.
And the Messiah, there's only one Messiah, or there was never a Messiah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was this all mythology, and you're looking at that the mythology of it, and I don't know. That's probably another conversation, because we're getting up close to time for me to start making dinner, and I've had a great time today.
I did too, Bill. I went quickly.
I think for next week we're just gonna call it Rabbit Hole, and we'll see what we come up with. It's the second week of Advent coming in, and so maybe more along this line, or maybe it's that transhumanism thing.
Humanism, yeah.
Okay, transhumanism. Okay,
right.
And we'll do transhumanism, and because I don't think that transhumanism is a bad thing, but I think that that's my opinion. But then I was also of the opinion of when everyone said, "Oh, the New World Order, that's this and that," and then I was like looking at that, or one world government. Well, why is that a bad thing? And I just didn't understand. I know, but there's a lot of evil in the world. But why is it bad that all of humanity comes together? Or at least have a facsimile of, that it seems like it comes together. Because I just don't, why is that bad? Why is that representative? Because if we were to talk about what Christ and Antichrist is, and I do have my opinions on that, but we can, when we get down into those rabbit holes, we can talk about that a bit,
And Peter Thiel.
And Peter Thiel. Well, yeah.
Is humanity supposed to end, Peter? Would you want humanity to end?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, yeah.
I don't think so, because he has a lot of, like a lot of people, he has a lot of time on his hands, and he's thinking about these things. and then some of the rabbit holes that we go down, and then who knows what his childhood was like. I mean,
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
you know, I mean, I have both of my parents, they came from alcoholic families, and both of them didn't drink, you know, or very little. They had both of their parents, they smoked cigarettes, but they never smoked cigarettes. And then when they started having children, they set up a rule that they would never hit us. And then the other thing is that I never had anybody shut down my ideas. Of course, that was, so I don't have that religious trauma that a lot of people have. They talked about from growing up in a religious family. You know, my dad was like, he was like almost an atheist, but I don't know. I as far as I know, he was an atheist, and so no, there was no one there to say that the ancient alien theory was a bunch of BS. Maybe they would have said it was, but it was like, oh well, you're just kind of out there becoming, you know, learning about things, and you can make up your own mind if it's true or not. And so that was my downfall.
And as long as you could reason it through, you know, that I think that's important. And that's, you know, something that has to happen, you know, just like in Animal Farmers, these sort of democracies that we do talk about, there's that sort of collegiality where freedom of thought is so important for anything to flourish. And I think, unfortunately, any type of fascist sort of agenda gets in the way of that.
Yeah, an authoritarian government, because they're afraid of losing their power.
And then there's usually some sort of, within that movement over time, a lot of great art that comes out of that. You know?
Well, yeah, look at the time period. You look at like Johnny Cash. Nobody can beat Johnny Cash is or Elvis Presley, you know, or you have that whole blues movement, and you have the whole rock and roll, and you have those artists, or, you know, like Coal Miner's Daughter, or Loretta Lynn. You have those you have those old time country people, and they came out of really hardcore lives, and their childhoods were really hardcore, but then came out of that was this beautiful music, or this music that people can relate to. What came out of it was something that was very relatable to others, and and that I guess that's where the whole thing of, because a lot of let's see, because people in the past still did have time to create things, even in the medieval time period. There was time, because you've heard about second sleeps, haven't you? Well, it was during that second sleep time, even as on the American frontier, that's when quilts got done. That's when new tools were invented. Everything was invented for the most part during second sleeps, during the time period between they go to bed, they wake up, and they got 2-3 hours of time. They split wood, they do their chores or whatever. Then they go back to sleep around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Then they wake up with the sun. And that time period at night, and I guess that's that time period when I probably that's when I'm most open.
Are you the most, you're the most receptive to energy, maybe?
I am the most receptive to the energy, and that's also when I get a little bit freaked out too, when that energy comes in, and I will tell that spirit or whatever, can you please come back in 12 hours from now when I'm awake, and I'm on my riding lawnmower or something like that, and it's right in the middle of the day, and they never do, because maybe I can't hear it at that time. It's, you know.
Yep.
It's just, yeah.
It's like your veil is too thin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, we're gonna log off, and then I'll talk to you backstage for a minute, and then and so thank everybody. I know that nobody
thank you
only
guys.
had thank you guys, and we'll see you next week. Bye.